How do you perceive a crowd? Do you approach a crowd feeling comfort, unity, and acceptance, or do you feel anxiety, tension, insignificance, and like you're completely out of control? Can you participate in the energy of a crowd, or would you rather sit out and watch it unfold? Is this instinctual to our human nature? Gustave Le Bon sure believes so. In his work, The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind, Le Bon poses the idea that crowd psychology and how we follow crowds are intrinsically human and, for a lot of people, unavoidable. Not that this is a bad thing, but Le Bon kind of makes it clear what he thinks. Your sense of identity and individuality vanishes, you think and behave differently than you do in isolation, and, my personal favorite, your logic and responsibility simply disappear. While Le Bon does make clear that this is just an inescapable flaw of the human mind, a tendency to follow that we were born with, I'm here to propose a different idea. How much of our concept of crowd psychology is a suggestion by the media we consume? It is no secret that the media can have strong influences on our beliefs and behavior. Today, I will show just how strongly the concepts of crowd psychology are reinforced through cinema. Before I dive into film, though, let me give a brief background on what Le Bon calls the 4 means of persuasion used by leaders of crowds. This is an essential aspect of Le Bon's crowd psychology. These means are what make people inclined to follow a leader and become part of the crowd. Affirmation. Short, easy-to-remember phrases that carry a belief. You see them everywhere. Political campaigns, brand slogans, etc. Repetition. Self-explanatory, but repeating an affirmation until the audience believes it's true. Again, you see this everywhere. It's why affirmations are so widespread. Contagion. How easily ideology then begins to spread in the crowd. Think about how people adopt these political ideologies after effective branding, how people become loyal customers after seeing the right advertising. Think about virality and trends, but on a larger scale. Prestige, qualities of importance and power that define the leader of a crowd. Maybe it's a well-known politician, someone that's well-educated, or a person with many accomplishments that gives them a sort of established credibility. With these 4 components, we can now start to look at how this impacts film audiences. Le Bon wrote in The Crowd a segment about theatrical representation that can still apply today. He stated, "Nothing has a greater effect on the imagination of crowds of every category than theatrical representations. The entire audience experiences at the same time the same emotions, and if these emotions are not at once transformed into acts, it is because the most unconscious spectator cannot ignore that he is a victim of illusions, and that he has laughed or wept over imaginary adventures." To put this into perspective, let's talk about war films. This genre is extremely successful at putting the audience in the middle of the action, but it is equally as effective at making scenes seem directed towards us to internalize, not just to spectate. War films are notorious for heavy action, gore, and for a long time, a sense that this action and honor is what patriotic audiences should strive for. The military leaders look directly into the camera and speak to us, not the hundreds of CGI extras. Speeches boost our morale, not the main protagonists. These techniques make people desire action and feeling heroic. That is, until All Quiet on the Western Front, one of the only movies that was very clearly an anti-war perspective that challenges the appeal to a military psychological crowd. The main character, Paul, is genuinely excited for the brotherhood of joining the military during World War I, but as his friends are killed one by one, we begin to perceive war in the same lens that Paul does. No progress is being made on the front, the nation's leaders are pushing troops to fight even with no chance of winning, and everyone died for nothing. Cinematic techniques change how we see the story over the course of the film. This includes changes in camera perspective, like we're being spoken to directly, wide shots of the crowd, and use of effective sound and editing skills. The clip that has been playing in the background is a great example of this technique. Besides war films, though, we can see the uses of the means of persuasion in so many other genres. Here's a clip from The Wolf of Wall Street that I can't even begin to explain. The main character has prestige, he's admired, and he is capable of creating the weirdest out-of-context psychological crowd I've seen in a while. Le Bon also states in his segment about theatrical representation, the unreal has almost as much influence on them as the real. They have an evident tendency not to distinguish between the two. He implies that audiences blur the lines between characters and the actors, plot lines, and reality. This was written in 1896. It's not a new idea based on cinema alone, but new technologies that can further portray a director's vision facilitates even blurrier lines. Aside from these examples, all films create an environment that is intended to fully convince the audience that they are inside of it, or the environment is created to take away some purpose. Media is to communicate. However, just as film has the power of convincing us to be a certain way, so can philosophical content that describes how we act to ourselves. At the end of the day, Le Bon's The Crowd is just that, media. Do we need someone to describe trends and our actions to us? Would this not be universally understood if it's so true? It is reasonable to believe that Le Bon's crowd psychology is genuinely applicable, but how much of what we're told is an affirmation, repeated enough by someone with prestige that it becomes contagious? Could Le Bon himself be a leader of a crowd that values not being part of a crowd? The film industry buys into this ideology as well, much like the main plot of Lost in Translation by Sofia Coppola. The two main characters, Americans temporarily staying in Japan, feel alone but find comfort in each other. The whole purpose of the film, though, is their reluctance to make themselves blend in with the crowd. They value their own identities as Americans and consequently don't immerse themselves in their new environment as much as they could. But they make a new crowd consisting of each other that has the same goal and same ideology. Trying to pinpoint whether crowd psychology is a natural phenomenon or reinforced by culture is like trying to answer what came first, the chicken or the egg. You may never truly know the answer, but if Le Bon has taught you anything, don't wait for me to tell you that answer. Make one or find one of your own.